Varney the Vampire, Chapter 4. The morning, the consultation, the fearful suggestion. That wonderfully different impressions and feelings, with regard to the same circumstances, come across the mind in the broad, clear, and beautiful light of day, to what haunt the imagination, and often render the judgment almost incapable of action, when the heavy shadow of night is upon all things. There must be a downright physical reason for this effect. It is so remarkable and universal. It seems that the sun's rays so completely alter and modify the constitution of the atmosphere, that it produces, as we inhale it, a wonderfully different effect upon the nerves of the human subject. We can account for this phenomenon in no other way. Perhaps never in his life had he, Henry Bannerworth, felt so strongly this transition of feeling as he now felt it when the beautiful daylight gradually dawned upon him, as he kept his lonely watch by the bedside of his slumbering sister. That watch that had been a perfectly undisturbed one. Not the least sight or sound of any intrusion had reached his senses. All had been as still as the very grave. And yet, while the night lasted, and he was more indebted to the rays of the candle, which he had placed upon a shelf for the power to distinguish objects, than to the light of morning, 1,000 uneasy and strange sensations had found a home in his agitated bosom. He looked so many times at the portrait which was in the panel that at length he felt an undefined sensation of terror creep over him whenever he took his eyes off it. He tried to keep himself from looking at it, but he found it in vain, so he adopted what perhaps was certainly the wisest, best plan, namely, to look at it continually. He shifted his chair so that he could gaze upon it without any effort, and he placed the candle so that a faint light was thrown upon it, and there he sat, a prey to many conflicting and uncomfortable feelings, until the daylight began to make the candle flame look dull and sickly. Solution for the events of the night he found none. He racked his imagination in vain to find some means, however vague, of endeavoring to account for what occurred, and still he was at fault. All was to him wrapped in the gloom of the most profound mystery. And how strangely, too, the eyes of that portrait appeared to look upon him, as if instinct with life, and as if the head to which they belonged was busy in endeavoring to find out the secret communings of his soul. It was wonderfully well executed, that portrait, so lifelike, that the very features seemed to move as if you gazed upon them. "It shall be removed," said Henry. "I would remove it now, but that seems absolutely painted on the panel, and I should awake Flora in any attempt to do so." He arose and ascertained that was such the case, and that it would require a workman with proper tools adapted to the job to remove the portrait. "True," he said, "I might now destroy it, but it is a pity to obscure a work of such rare art as this is. I should blame myself if I were. It shall be removed to some other room of the house, however." Then all of a sudden it struck Henry how foolish it would be to remove the portrait from the wall of a room which, in all likelihood, after that night, would be uninhabited, for it was not probable that Flora would choose again to inhabit a chamber in which she had gone through so much terror. "It can be left where it is," he said, "and we can fasten it up, if we please, even the very door of this room, so that no one need trouble themselves any further about it." The morning was now coming fast, and just as Henry thought he would partially draw a blind across the window in order to shield from the direct rays of the sun the eyes of Flora, she awoke. "Help! Help!" she cried, and Henry was by her side in a moment. "You are safe, Flora, you are safe," he said. "Where is it now?" she said. What, dear Flora?" "The dreadful apparition. Oh, what have I done to be made thus perpetually miserable?" "Think no more of it, Flora. I must think. My brain is on fire. 1,000,000 of strange eyes seem gazing on me. Great heaven, she raves," said Henry. "Hark! Hark! Hark! He comes on the wings of the storm. Oh, it is most horrible, horrible!" Henry rang the bell, but not sufficiently loudly to create any alarm. The sound reached the waking ear of the mother, who in a few moments was in the room. "She has awakened," said Henry, "and has spoken, but she seems to me to wander in her discourse. For God's sake, soothe her, and try to bring her mind round to its usual state." "I will, Henry, I will." "And I think, mother, if you were to get her out of this room and into some other chamber as far removed from this one as possible, it would tend to withdraw her mind from what has occurred." "Yes, it shall be done. Oh, Henry, what was it? What do you think it was?" "I am lost in a sea of wild conjecture. I can form no conclusion. Where is Mr. Marchdale?" "I believe in his chamber." "Then I will go and consult with him." Henry proceeded at once to the chamber which was, as he knew, occupied by Mr. Marchdale. As he crossed the corridor, he could not but pause a moment to glance from a window at the face of nature. As often the case, the terrific storm of the preceding evening had cleared the air, and rendered it deliciously invigorating and lifelike. The weather had been dull, and there had been for some days a certain heaviness in the atmosphere, which was now entirely removed. The morning sun was shining with uncommon brilliancy. Birds were singing in every tree and on every bush, so pleasant, so spirit-stirring, health-giving a morning seldom he had seen. And the effect upon his spirits was great, although not altogether what it might have been had all gone on as it usually was in the habit of doing at that house. The ordinary little casualties of evil fortune had certainly, from time to time, in the shape of illness, in one thing or another, attacked the family of the Bannersworth, in common with every other family. But here suddenly had arisen a something at once terrible and inexplicable. He found Mr. Marchdale up and dressed, and apparently in deep and anxious thought. The moment he saw Henry, he said, "Flora is awake, I presume?" "Yes, but her mind appears to be much disturbed." "From bodily weakness, I dare say." "But why would she be bodily weak? She was strong and well, aye, well as she could ever be in all her life. The glow of youth and health was on her cheeks. Is it possible that, in the course of one night, she should become bodily weak to such an extent?" "Henry," said Mr. Marchdale sadly, "sit down. I am not, as you know, a superstitious man." "You certainly are not." "And yet I never in all my life was so absolutely staggered as I have been by the occurrence of tonight." "Say on." "There is a frightful, a hideous solution of them, one which every consideration will tend to add strength to, one which I tremble to name now, although yesterday at this hour I should have laughed it to scorn." "Indeed?" "Yes, it is so. Tell no one that which I am about to say to you. Let the dreadful suggestion remain with ourselves alone. Henry Bannerworth." I am lost in wonder." "You promise me?" What? "That you will not repeat my opinion to anyone." "I do." "On your honor?" "On my honor, I promise." Mr. Marchdale rose, and proceeding to the door, he looked out to see that there were no listeners near. Having ascertained then that they were quite alone, he returned, and drawing a chair close to that on which Henry sat, he said, "Henry, have you ever heard of a strange and dreadful superstition, which in some countries is extremely rife, by which it is supposed that there are things who never die?" "Never die?" "Never, in a word, Henry. Have you never heard of I dread to pronounce the word." "Speak it. God of heaven, let me hear it." "A vampire."